snowing downtown. So anyway, we're hoping you're all dry. So, so welcome. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Eric Grafstein sitting beside me, and who has been working in this area for a long, long time, who has the bigger picture view, and I think will give a very good overview of the whole topic, and certainly generate some ideas and some thoughts moving forward as to what the future looks like for the emergency department and its role in the entire system. So Dr. Grafstein is the chair here at Providence Healthcare, and is also chair of the Regional Emergency Services Committee here in Vancouver Coastal. So if it's okay with you, Eric, I'll just hand it over to you, and thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks, Julian. It's really nice to be able to speak to all of you. As Julian said, I've been doing this for quite a while, various aspects of trying to improve the information system at St. Paul's. And I guess now I have, you know, I sit on an executive steering committee for Vancouver Coastal Health / PHSA. So I sort of am a bit closer than I used to be to some of the thought process and decisions around moving forward with IT solutions. You know, it's interesting. I didn't pick the title of this talk, Electronic Solutions for a Brighter Future in the ED, but I bet if I polled all of you, very few of you would say that the future for IT looks bright. But in fact, we are about to see a big explosion in both interest and activity at all levels of government and hospital organizations around IT. And I think in 5 years' time, and I know for sure in 10 years' time, you'll be thinking to yourself, how did we ever exist in those dark old days, which is today? I'm going to talk about that a little bit further. The things that I thought I would sort of share with you today is, you know, there's some learning objectives, and I thought I'd talk about who is doing IT well currently, and we would talk about reading the tea leaves for the future. That's where the discussion goes toward what's going to be happening in a hospital in a region near you, and then what you need to do to prepare yourself to get maximal benefit out of the upcoming IT implementations and upgrades and system changes that are happening. And finally, something about how we should be evaluating the technology that's out there in terms of whether or not it's good for us to use. And if you have any questions, feel free to chime in at any time. Now, I'm not used to using this software, so if I ignore you, it's not because I wanted to, it's because Julian has been distracted and hasn't pointed it out to me that someone has a question, but feel free at any time.
I'm going to interrupt you, Eric. I just want to make sure that everybody could see the slides advance. Joanna, if you could unmute and let us know that the slides are advancing and that you can hear Eric well, please.
Yes, I hear Eric perfectly, and the slides are advancing.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is the class EMR adoption model, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. It's the way that IT people talk about when they compare systems, the way we might compare cars. Julie and I might say, I have, you know, a 327 whatever engine, and you might say, I have 4 doors. You know, this is the way that IT people talk about their EMRs, their electronic medical records, or EHRs, electronic hospital records. And you know, if you're completely digital, you're at stage 7, and there's a lot of short forms and things like that in this document. The things that I would make you aware of is that most sites in Canada are around stage 2. You have some lab imaging and pharmacy. You have the ability to look those things up. Most people don't have much in the way of documentation or CPOE, computerized provider order entry, or, you know, clinical protocols online. Very few have physician documentation. And you can look on the right-hand side, and this is America, and it gives you a rough idea of just how far along most systems are. In the States, most systems look like they're at around stage 3. So, you know, you don't have to feel too sad that where you are is not perfect. It's not perfect anywhere. But as I said, that's about to change. When I canvassed, I sent out a poll to some of my Canadian colleagues around the country to ask who is doing IT well, and it's really quite interesting. You know, I think that Lionsgate is one of the few hospitals in the country that is more or less electronic. They have documentation and they have order entry and electronic medication administration record, EMR. Their big issue is one of interoperability. They're an island. They don't connect to the hospital system, and that makes what they use not so helpful. If you go in the States, there are tons of examples where institutions are digital or have class level 6 or 7. And one of them is the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And if any of you are interested in seeing how IT should be done, you know, brilliantly, you might want to go to Pittsburgh. It seems like an odd place for there to be excellence. They have a pretty crappy baseball team. Their hockey team isn't doing so well. But the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center has partnered with industry and has just done a brilliant job. I had a chance to go there this past summer, and they are quite good. But again, they're one of many, many, many American institutions. And for Americans, it makes sense. There's a financial reward for doing this right and being able to bill properly that Canadians don't have. North York General Hospital has one of the, it's fairly far along in the Cerner system. I know because my father was a patient there. They have order entry and they have electronic medication administration. They do have some clinical documentation in their ED, and they are one of the furthest along in the country. At St. Paul's Hospital, we have some aspects of that are level 6. We have some discharge summary that's quite advanced. We have provider order entry, but we don't have we don't have any nursing clinical documentation to speak of. Alberta has something called NetCare, which is a provincial, we have something similar in Vancouver Coast called Care Connect. It's basically a backbone where you can find out about other patients in the province fairly easily. So from an integrated kind of approach where all hospitals are sort of on a network, Alberta does very well, but they are not far along in any of the other venues or class categories. So really, when you get down to it, there's virtually no Canadian institution that's completely digital. And I'm guessing if we have this talk in 5 years, we would see that probably a quarter of the major institutions in the province are. So again, don't feel bad. No one's doing this particularly well. So let's talk about reading the tea leaves. In my house, the way I would read this is my wife would be yelling at me for not loading the dishwasher properly and put the cup back in. But you know, there is things that we can do to understand what's going on in the environment around us. And I just wanted to update you on what's going on at a provincial level. And I mentioned NetCare, the Alberta product. Well, just this month, your province of British Columbia has created a provincial electronic health record that you can access. If you use Cerner or Meditech, there's a contextual move when you click onto this provincial EHR. I guess it's called Care Connect provincially. And you know, if you want to find out if your patient had lab tests, that's PLIS, or diagnostic imaging, that's that PDIV. When you go onto this Care Connect application, you'll be able to find out where in the province your patient has had blood work. That's health authorities, but not, and in some private labs, but only in the interior, and I can't remember if it's VHA. That is a huge step forward and helps to, you know, it portends the way things are going in the future, where you'll have a lot better access to your patient's information, and you won't have to repeat an X-ray from someone who came from another health region. There's going to be a PharmaNet upgrade. This has been in the works for several years, but this notion of meds reconciliation will improve, and because in the current PharmaNet environment, you really can't tell if the patient's had his medications tweaked by the family doctor, right? If they were on Lasix 40 a day and the doctor said take 80, the prescription just says 40 milligrams, take 1 a day, unless the patient's had to go for a refill, right? I think that in the future, you won't be writing prescriptions for your patients anymore. You will be submitting the prescription to PharmaNet, and the patient could go to any pharmacy they want, and that prescription will be downloaded. And that applies for duplicates and triplicates. So again, that probably is a 5 to 10 year project, but again, will be of tremendous benefit to us. And as all of you know, or should know, that the province of British Columbia has agreed on having only 2 systems, 2 electronic health record systems, EHRs, for our hospitals, and they are Cerner and Meditech. So for those of you who are in the interior, and for those of you in VHA and Northern Health Authority, you're already on the right track. People in the interior are using Meditech. That's also acceptable. Fraser's Meditech is acceptable. The people who are currently, sort of in the wilderness are Vancouver Coastal Health, where we have 3 systems. Those are going. We will be getting these other systems. And in my sort of quest to find out what's going along, almost all the Cerner systems anyway in VHA, they're scheduled for some major changes, clinical documentation and order entry strategies that'll all roll out in the near future. All right, so that's nice. I've tried to paint a bit of a positive picture about what's happening. I mean, you have to be patient with this IT stuff. There's a lot of cooks playing around with the soup, and it's not as easy as it once was to get anything done. So, why have we had trouble so far getting solutions, even if they're little solutions? So I think this is a huge source of frustration for us at Province Healthcare, for people in Vancouver Coastal Health, and I'm sure for all of you. And the reason is a lot of these things are not cheap, and going along with that are a large number of failures. And so expensive failures just makes the government go crazy, and the people who are funding these things go crazy. And why do these things fail? I really believe there's a lack of credible physician and nursing leaders and champions. And the government has stepped in to minimize losses by regions and hospitals, and it's become very tightly controlling of how it spends resources. And you really can't blame them to some extent. And we're going to talk about how you can overturn that and how you can convince people that your project, your idea is something worth doing. So as I said, it's like making wine. IT takes a long time to develop and mature, and if one person fails, the inclination is to think that all people are going to fail. So there's really an uphill battle to try and convince the people with money that you can do something and make a difference. And so most of you probably have thought in the past, why can't we just get the best of breed solution? Why can't we do what, in the emergency department, I think WellSoft is recognized as a purveyor of excellent ED software, and there are probably others. And the reason is we look at things through different lenses. So them would be the government. The government wants a system perspective. They want an integrated solution. That means they have lab and imaging and pharmacy and clinical documentation. They want those all in one platform. And why do they want them all in one platform? Well, if you have 2 different systems and one upgrades, then a new interface has to be constructed. And then if the other solution upgrades, then another interface has to be constructed. And so the cost of maintaining different systems is more expensive. It requires broader expertise. And so long ago, like more than a decade ago, most organizations and governments abandoned the idea of getting these best-of-breed solutions. Now, does that mean that there's no room for a best-of-breed or a customized homegrown solution? Of course there is, but in the new era where we have just a couple of systems, the the need to integrate a new solution, a new best-of-breed solution to existing systems is made easier because there's just one or maybe two. Hospitals, organizations, governments, they care about vendors. They want to know if the company has a market capitalization of $100 billion like GE, or has 1,000 implementations across North America like Cerner, or whether or not they have a $100 million market cap and are in 5 centers. Because governments and organizations and people that pay money to support these solutions, they don't want the company to go bankrupt, or they don't want it to be supported. They want things to be scalable, and they have broad technical specifications that they feel are important, that they want, that help drive the decisions about what solutions to use. Us, on the other hand, we have a very local perspective, and we want to be nimble and efficient. We want to be integrated, but we want flexibility. And for us, if we're looking at 2 system solutions, and one, for order entry, and one takes 2 extra mouse clicks, we want the other solution. We want the one that takes the least mouse clicks. But that solution may support none of the things that the thems want, right? We want a good front end. We want it to look pretty. We want it to be easy to use. And we want an excellent back end because we want to be able to get data out of it. And again, those things are important, but they may not, when governments are balancing the needs to have and wants to have and nice to have, some of those things fall off. And it's up to us to kind of remind them about that, because there's a balance, right? Because if you get something that's integrated and has a big company and is scalable, but no one wants to use it, then that's not a good solution either. All right, so there's a recognition that clinician input matters. So even though it looks like we don't have a lot of control, we actually have a lot to say, and people actually want us to say. The trouble is that up until right now, there's not a lot of clinician input. All right, so as we talk about clinician input, and I've talked about this, the reality, who's in charge. 20 years ago, I could go to my hospital and say, hey, I went on the internet and found this great hospital ED system. Let's implement it. And they go, wow, okay, that sounds great. Let's do that. But we're not in charge anymore. The staff is not in charge. The hospitals aren't even in charge. The regions aren't in charge. It's the government that's in charge that makes decisions. And they've disseminated some of that to health authorities, but by and large, you should be very clear that the organization where you actually work and do your emergency care is not the place that can make decisions in general. They can put together lists, they can shuffle lists, high priority, low priority, but it's often very hard for them to create big changes. Maybe they can do little ones, but usually those reside at least at the regional level. Okay, so what the hell is the point of doing anything then if we have no control? But we do have control, because there is, along with this recognition about or at least recognition by the province about what they need and by the health authorities, is the recognition is that the reason why things have failed in the past is because there hasn't been broad input from clinicians. And I just want to give you an example of an implementation of a little bit of software, a tracking board implementation at my hospital. One of the medical units wanted a tracking board. They were interested in pay for performance, and they wanted to improve. And so they took some software that was available through, the ED had it, and they got the IT people to invest some time and energy and configured a tool that they could use. And it's built. But what happened was that medical unit service decided that they didn't have the manpower to spare to create a champion and go through the process of implementing, going around and educating people, because the IT people didn't have the expertise and didn't have access to the staff. And so the project has died. It's not going anywhere. It wasn't an expensive project, but it was time and energy that the IT group could have spent doing something else. And those kind of failure things just to me highlight the need that you really, it's not like going to the store and, going to Future Shop and buying a television. You actually have to be invested in any IT solution that you have. You kind of have to have some understanding of what's going on, or at least someone who you work with has to. All right, so here's a little quiz for you, and this should tell you if you're on the right track. So, do you know the name of the business analyst if you have a solution or an issue that needs a solution? Let's say you want to create an order set, or the triage codes aren't right, or something like that. Do you know the name of the person to call if you want a report? Are you on a first name basis with the decision support person in your region? Do you know your programmer? Could you call them or make contact with them or tell them about a little glitch that you have? If the answer to those is not yes, then you need to do some work. Do you have regular meetings with your IT group to discuss issues, things that need improvements? And along the same lines, do you have a needs list? Here are the things. We know our system. We know these are some changes that could be made without a lot of cost. Can you do that for us? Those are, if you're not doing those things, you're out of the loop. Are you part of an IT steering committee in your hospital, region, province? If you're not, someone needs to be engaged. And by that, and lastly, are you interested and do you care and are you engaged? And not everybody has to love IT stuff. I mean, I get that, but there has to be a champion. And from the, if we're talking about emergency, there has to be an emergency champion in your hospital, in your ED, who's prepared to step forward and do a large part of the grunt work, so that you build trust among your hospital executive or administration, among the regional administration and the government, that people know that if you say you're going to do something, it's going to get done and implemented, and no one's going to have egg on their face. So here are some keys to success. Get on IT committees, get to know the local people. Going to vendor conference is a fantastic thing to do. And if you get to know some of the IT administrators in your region, or maybe your hospital administrators, maybe they'll fund you to go to a Cerner conference or a Meditech conference. And what goes on at those conferences, besides a lot of free lunches and a few free beers, which is always helpful, is that you get to see what other people are doing with the technology, what the technology can do. And you don't have to rely necessarily on your IT folks saying, oh, that can't be done. Because many times we have discovered that things can be done, it's just that the IT person that we're talking to doesn't realize that. The Health Information Management Society, that's a more academic group. They have a conference every year. It was in Vegas just last week, this week ongoing, and that's a good way to get to know what people are doing out there in a sort of futuristic kind of way. The Journal of the American Medical Informatics Association, again, a very technical or a very esoteric journal, much more focused on IT research. And then finally, you get a Master's of Information Technology if you completely lose control of your senses and love this stuff to bits. Again, if you're doing this, if you're doing a master's, then you're actually wanting to be involved at a very senior level and strategy level. All right. The other things that are important to do is, or that I want to share with you, is the idea of building a business case. You have an idea, something can be done, and you're trying to convince people to do it. In this day and age, building new software or a new application or buying new software only really happens if there's a strong business case and if it's scalable. So, these are some of the issues that are important. Patient safety issues resonate. Dollar issues resonate more. So we were able to get a $50,000 grant from Vancouver Coastal Health about 4 years ago, to create some clinical documentation and to make the process for submitting WCB reports to WorkSafe BC electronic. We argued that because of the dual paper approach and because we were an alternate payment plan, no one was doing it, we We tracked the revenues that we were earning from St. Paul's and MSJ. That was about 25 to 30K at the time per annum. And we said, if you give us the $50,000 we need to do this, we're going to increase the revenue to pay for it within 2 years. So 5 years later, that software generates $120,000 per annum, and the organization shares some of the increased money with us to support some other IT initiatives. So that was a real win-win, and there's a lot of things like that out there. If you can show that you are going to decrease the time it takes to do things, i.e. a pay-for-performance thing, then that really resonates. If you create electronic solutions to decrease transcription cost, again, decrease the need for coders, increase revenue. The caveat is that you have to know what things cost. That's not hard to find out, but you know, CFOs of regions and hospitals, they understand this kind of speak, and it makes a very strong case to get things done. So how to adjudicate technology? So when you're trying to decide what to do, what to put in your hospital, or what to advocate for, because we know we're getting some systems, right? But you know, one of our tasks going forward is going to be to understand exactly what the Cerner limitations are, what good things they do, what things it absolutely must do. And so that's going to take a bit of work and a bit of energy, but that's important because otherwise it'll just roll out. Because I can tell you that the mantra is vanilla. Vanilla works. So they're going to, as much as possible, give you out-of-the-box solutions. And so you need to be able to adjudicate and say, is this solution going to work, or does it need to be tweaked? So does it provide better patient care? Does it solve some significant problem? Does it in fact do things like send a discharge summary to a family doctor? That might not, I guess that's providing better patient care, but it was a solution to a problem that physicians weren't getting timely notification that their patient had been in the emergency department. Will it improve ED flow and efficiency? And I think for us, this is one of the critical things, right? We are constantly up against increasing volume. So if you can demonstrate that what you're going to do is going to really change flow and efficiency, and you should absolutely go for this kind of solution. And then what is the cost? I mean, because lots of things are helpful, but are they really helpful? Does the net gain in safety or performance or efficiency, does it justify the cost? That's tricky, and it may, what may work for some people or some groups may not work for others, but that's an important consideration. And then, do enough other people care about this? Is it scalable? If your solution works, is it likely to be able to be transported or transmuted and given to other sites? Okay, so as I said, you want IT solutions to increase efficiency, and you want IT solutions to increase the patient experience. And this is an old example of something that I participated on with Grant Innes like a decade ago now. We were one of the first sites to use order entry in Canada, and we just looked to see what happened to abdominal pain patients that the group that had CPOE, provider order entry, and the group that didn't. And we found that there was a reduction in length of stay by 30 minutes. And that all had to do with the time the chart stayed in a basket waiting for someone to enter the orders. That's the kind of efficiency gains that are possible with these solutions, and that you need to demonstrate if you want either to be interested in pursuing this yourself or to convince the organization that it's worth doing. All right, so all these things are basically coming in the next few years, and I just sort of prioritize them because so much of what the IT world does drives our process, but you really want a good registration system. You want one that's quick. You want to be able to register patients, you know, partially. You just get their name and their personal health, provincial health number, maybe date of birth in there, and then you can start doing things to patients. You want tracking boards that work effectively to provide guidance as to what's going on in the department. You want a good triage system, although in the last year I probably, this slide is a year old, and now I would move triage down somewhat. But it's very important to be able to accurately and easily and simply use an electronic tool to categorize patients by CTAS. CPOE is an incredible tool. It does a myriad of things. We were lucky we stumbled on it at St. Paul's. It allows you to do so much, collect data, standardize patient care, provide information to clinicians. It does increase safety, although it has its own problems in that it's easier to enter orders on the wrong patient. Electronic medication administration records are crucial for closing the loop and getting key information on time, door to dispensing time for drugs, for antibiotics, for pain medication, which are going to be markers of care in provincial scorecards in the coming days. So I think I see Jillian with a comment. Is that?
No, she just. Sorry, Jillian, if you could just go up to your arrow and click it again. Hopefully that'll get rid of it, or we can break it down here.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Discharge dispositions and electronic summaries are really helpful for the patient and for the family doctor. And then you can see that documentation is really some of the least important things, I think. Nursing documentation is way more important than physician documentation. There are things on the nursing document like comorbidities and things that are really helpful to have. And the physician document really is about sharing information about the patient to another clinician. And it's important and helpful, but as you will see, it's not necessarily a time saver. And it's probably the last thing that should be implemented in these broad electronic solutions. So I've tried to create a list of kind of 5 things that you would want, and in your IT systems, things that you should think about. The crucial one is interoperability, and that's like single sign-on. So when I log onto the Cerner system, I'm also logging into the radiology PAC system so I can see the images for that patient. I'm also logging on to Care Connect so I can see what's happening to the patient's other encounters throughout the province. And this is where the Lionsgate solution or the best-of-breed ED solutions tend to fail, is because they're not really integrated well with the other systems in the hospital. And unless you have that, people balk at doing it. You could have the best documentation system in the world, for clinical documentation, but if it's a sort of a standalone thing and you have to leave the place where you enter the orders and see the results and do most of your work, people are not going to want to use that tool. The second point really is about garnering electronic efficiency, and it ties in with the third point. You want your system to be sophisticated that when you do a thing, it can set in motion a cascade of events. And I have to, excuse me, I'll give you an example. So on a tracking board, if you document on the tracking board that a patient is discharged, that should set in motion a process where the triage nurse is notified that a bed is going to become available, the tracking board changes to the bed to dirty status, pages the housekeeper, and that's at least 4 things that one click should do. So you really are getting efficiencies, and that actually will save you time and create processes that are electronic processes that are worthwhile and that staff will see a difference on. The linkage between presenting complaint and order entry is, if someone comes to the triage desk and the triage nurse enters a complaint that is, a cardiac type chest pain complaint that is CTAS 2, that should create an orders, automatically create orders. Now, someone could choose to ignore it if they wanted to, or undo them, but that creates a huge efficiency in timeliness. It takes the pressure off the triage nurse from having to do 1,000 things, be the Walmart greeter, be nice to everyone, make sure that the patients that she triaged are triaged appropriately, enter the CTAS code, write a little note if that's what they have to do. Too much to do at the triage desk, and to enter a troponin and an ECG. But those are the kind of things that we should be talking about. Tracking board functionality I already mentioned, and CPOE and EMR I already mentioned as well. Here, here's an example of our tracking board. This is the kind of notion I was talking about. When it's discharged, when there's a discharge around this, around this arrow here.
Oh, go down again. Yep. Now go back down.
Oh, yeah. It sets into the motion this cascade of processes that creates efficiencies. And if I click it again, does it go away?
Oh, just go up to the eraser there.
Eraser.
Right there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and then go up there and drop down. Clear.
Okay. Well, I'm getting the hang of this. It's great. Okay. Again, CPOE, you can sort of, so this, I think I've got a number of different things that are highlighted. Oops. So in this, the advantage of provider order entry, especially if physicians are doing it, is that you can build in things like the asthma pathway. You can pre-select things like do a peak flow. You can automatically page the respiratory disease educator so there's a referral. I pre-ticked the salbutamol, and there's some additional directions that you can have. So, people sort of think, well, I don't want to take the time to do the electronic order entry. Maybe someone else should do it. And you can, and it's possible to have nurses do this as well, but you can build in all sorts of other interesting things that are on these order entry screens that provide clinical guidelines and things to help practice. I think, again, it just highlights how incredibly powerful provider order entry is. All right, 5 more things that you should want to know. And a lot of this is, some of this is around documentation. So you really want to spend a lot of time reviewing the documentation strategies that are given to you. And there are really multiple strategies, and I've said many times that the best documentation strategy is a piece of paper and a pencil. I mean, if with a piece of paper and a pencil, you can draw a picture, you can draw, do bulleted points, you can write out a story, there's room to create a reassessment tab, there's a room to write a diagnosis, and if you want off to the side, you can write your instructions to the patient. A piece of paper is eminently flexible, and that's the kind of solutions you need electronically. Because, for an ankle sprain, you might not want to detail a whole lot of information, just put a few dots on a picture where the patient is tender, and maybe, a few words about how the injury happened. For someone who's weak and dizzy, COPD, CHF, cancer therapy last year, who comes in not feeling well, there is no template in the world where you can point and click, and that one might just need you to either transcribe or type a detailed history so that people understand the problem, people who read it understand the problem. The electronic discharge summaries are critical. They can do a lot of things. They summarize data for patients. They can be sent to the primary care physician or the consultant. And in our current world, we're using fax, but I think in the future there'll be portals and things where these information gets sent to that both physicians and patients can look at and read. Electronic paging and smartphones for consultants. I mean, one of the holy grails in the emergency department is to understand when consultants respond to a page, a call, to be able to document that. When they answer with a landline phone, there's no electronic record. But if they answer with BlackBerries, that information can be kept and stored, and you start to be able to define, in terms of a process in the ED, how long it's taking for the consultants to deal with patients. That's a good thing to have. A new technology that's probably not that far away is this pre-registration of EHS patients. The ambulance service is finally coming into the computer age and is trialing now electronic documentation solutions. They will be able to send those to hospital. And so I can see a time in the future where they are sending their information and the patient is basically in a pre-registration folder, and when they come to the ED, all the triage nurse has to do is sort of move them into active and check the registration things, but the PHN will already have been captured, the patient's name, the presenting complaint. It'll be a time saver, and plus the EHS history will be there, and this will be available probably in the next year or two, and certainly when Cerner goes live in Vancouver Coastal Health in 5 years or something, that should be available. The last thing, the dashboard technology, many places in Canada are starting to develop this, the ability to sort of take the information of patients registering, coming, going, the time it takes to see physicians, and to create kind of an air traffic controller technology so that you really have the ability to monitor and manage what's going on in your department. I mean, currently, the way we do things is we go, well, things are okay, things are horrible. I have to call someone in, call another hospital to help me out, call the senior administrator on call, we're too full. So hopefully these dashboards bridge a middle ground. We're rolling ours out in Vancouver Coastal Health in September. Stay tuned. There are newer, groovier technologies that I'm not sure are worth the cost, maybe. I'm going to talk about Vocera in a second. RFID is the radio frequency identification tags that patients can wear. They function very much in the same way that the current kind of bands do, that you can barcode with the barcode technology, except RFID can hold more information. Patient portals are kind of an interesting thing, and these have crept up in the States, not in Canada yet, although people are starting to do them. Sunnybrook has developed a patient portal. Capacity forecasting by this company, Amendo, I'm not going to talk about, but because others do, and it's a way that you can forecast the needs of staffing needs on an inpatient wards. They are good. Medication dispensing device, these electronic ones like Pyxis and Omnicell have been around for more than a decade. If you don't have them, they are a good stopgap in terms of understanding what kind of medications your patients are getting in advance of electronic medication administration records. I'm just going to talk about some case studies for just a couple of minutes, and this was an implementation of this radio frequency ID, and my apologies to anybody who this was not one that went particularly well, and the goal is not really to blame anybody. It's just to show how things can go awry. There was a region that wanted to, they had good intentions. They wanted to accurately measure some key time points: when the patients arrived, when the patients arrived at triage, when the patients were seen by a physician, when they were discharged. And their current solution wasn't able, at that time, was not able to facilitate the capture of this data electronically. So there was a solution where they were going to give tags to patients and tags to physicians, and when physician comes into close proximity with the patient, it passively captures this information. It was a $1.2 million solution, and they did the request for proposal, as it should have been done, except that they chose a vendor that really had no experience in the hospital. The implementation went as scheduled, but there really wasn't great education. In retrospect, there probably wasn't great priming of the users as to why this was important and to why they should really work to make this work. The clinicians at the grassroots level, I don't think, had bought in. I don't know if it's because they didn't want to or they weren't given the information. It's not clear. But two things happened. The tags got lost. This company with no hospital experience didn't have a really great way of recapturing the devices. You know, patients said, okay, they said, okay, you can go now, and the patient left, and they had the tag with them, and they were expensive, and they didn't come back. And then the physicians complained that they didn't want to be tracked. They felt like they were, mice in a maze, and ultimately the whole thing failed. And so that was sort of $1.2 million that was not able to be recouped. And again, it creates this bad taste in people's mouths that, IT things are not to be trifled with, that this region or this site or, we're not going to do this anymore. And I actually think that our RFID solutions are a really cool solution to a lot of things, like when the consultant comes, but they're expensive solutions. And so you really have to understand what you want, what you need, and, is the solution going to be worth the effort? So here's another example of a solution an implementation that went well. And this was implementation of Vocera. So for those of you that don't know but have watched Star Trek, you will immediately understand when I say Vocera is like touching the A thing and then you start to talk. Because that's what this is. It's a VoIP solution, voice over IP. And if someone calls you, you can talk hands-free, but if you want to talk to someone, you have to press that little white button there that you see. And they had some good goals. They wanted to optimize their workforce and prepare for the future. They wanted to increase the team's efficiency and effectiveness. They wanted to reduce the time in searching for staff or for patients. And, all of you who wander around the emergency departments either get frustrated by the overhead page that says, Dr. Grafstein line, and you don't hear the line. And so you wait again, and then they tell you, and then you call, and they've hung up, or you walk over to them, and the call is gone. And there's a huge amount of waste in time and efficiency that this solution would help with. There was a thought that if they were going to put in this cutting-edge or leading-edge technology, staff would think that was cool, and it would help recruit the staff and make them feel good. So I thought those were all laudable goals. And the cost of the implementation was not cheap, right? It's $300K with 30-odd K a year to maintain the system. To me, that's a lot of money. I mean, in some it is, and to some it isn't. But you have to get a lot of efficiency for me to get that, to spend that money. There are a lot of other things I think that can be done for that amount of money too. So, I think that was one of the things that I wondered about was the cost. It was funded by the foundation, which was good. And let's see if I got this in the right order. So this is the the result. So they were looking. One of the things they were looking at was efficiency, and this is a graph of pay for performance. And you can the gray arrow with the blue halo shows when the implementation happened, and you can really see that in terms of pay for performance, there was no real change based on the implementation of Vocera. On the other hand, in the final analysis, they had a successful implementation, and there was staff uptake. And this is not to be trifled with. This is part of how they do business now. It was a game changer, and I think they deserve a ton of credit for that. If you look at the RFID example, it's tough, and it was a great regional experiment. The other hospitals are looking at this now to see whether or not they want to do it. And it primes the staff to further innovations. They can do this. They can do other things. Was it worth the cost? Maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but I think to them, they're reasonably satisfied with how things have gone. So that's sort of kind of a tale of two cities. I have a few minutes to talk about documentation strategies. I've touched on this briefly. Here's some myths, some things that are falsehoods. Electronic documentation has to be faster than writing to be effective. Well, that is never going to happen, and you need to talk to your constituents and tell them that, because a lot of this is about managing expectations. If they think that going to electronic, typing, dictating, whatever, is going to be faster, they're wrong. Another myth is that the point-and-click T system is best. Well, it may be a solution for some types of things that are very protocolized, like stroke and TIA. because if you need a certain, or PE, where you can tick the Wells criteria to decide whether or not you need to go and investigate the patient further. But some things are just too complex, and things that most things require a narrative. So chest pain going to right shoulder came on at rest. I mean, that's okay. But what happens if the story is I'm with my mistress at the local hotel. Things are moving along, and then I get the big squeeze. It goes away, but it comes back again as I try again in my amorous adventures, and then I come to the hospital. That nuance cannot be captured with a point-and-click system. So,
by big squeeze, you mean chest pain?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Another myth that one documentation style fits all. I've talked about that already, and there are no technological challenges to stop this from happening right now. Well, that is a lie. The technology that currently exists, while it might allow electronic documentation currently, does not support it in the way that we need it. This is a version, I think, of the new Apple iPad that I think is meant to come out in the next year or so. It's this kind of technology that will be helpful for us. And the truth is that there is no, the tools that we will be using when those of us that are going to roll out electronic documentation do so, those tools aren't created yet. But in the next 5 years, there'll be a sea change of the kind of tools that we use, and they will allow us to do the job more easily. So the best documentation strategy, I think, is when the presenting complaint is registered at triage, you get that links to a document. So if I come in with my presenting complaint is chest pain, the option that I am presented with first is this document is a chest pain type document that will have a variety of different strategies, including transcription, including typing, including point of click if those things are relevant. Embedded in that will be an order set that's specifically chest pain based, and also within that document is the ability to finish the discharge instructions and the discharge planning and diagnoses for the patient. Everything in one spot, like a piece of paper. And I'm not sure if the Cerner or Meditech solutions have that, but in my heart, I think that's the best solution. So, in conclusion, the game is rigged. The government has already decided what tools we're going to use. We're going to use a Cerner solution. We're going to use a Meditech solution. There are other solutions out there, but we have to deal with the hand we're given. But we need to get in the game anyway, and we need to participate and help make things better. Clinical expertise is crucial. We all have to. We have a responsibility to know what is going on with these IT solutions. We can't be passive, or we'll just get what we're given, right? We need to help the educators of those purveyors of technology so they can give us what we need. This is the right time to do that. A lot of the technology that we're going to be using isn't on the market currently, and that lastly, there are provincial strategies that are going to get us somewhere decent. In 5 to 10 years, you will all be saying, yeah, this is better than it was. This is good. I don't know how we lived with what we lived with before. And I think that's the end of it. And I put my email address if any of you want to contact me. I'm happy to chat. And if you have questions now, I'm happy to take them.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Eric. For your information, everybody, we had to mute everybody so that we don't get feedback from the different sites.
Okay. So
what we'll do is, for those of you who are online, if you want to ask a question, there's an icon at the below all the names. That's the hand. If you click on that, we'll see it, and then we can unmute you and get you to ask your question. Otherwise, we get a lot of feedback and we can't hear people talking. So again, thank you, Eric. While people are thinking of their questions, we have a few minutes here. I just want to say that we'll post this talk up on the Evidence to Excellence website, so that's evidencetoexcellence.ca. We are aware that one of the slides will have to blur out the names, so we'll edit that out. And so for those of you who saw that, we'll take care of that. So No baddie. We'll take care of it. I guess one of the questions I have, I mean, this is an excellent talk in terms of the breadth of it. It's just huge, and to even get your head around it. I mean, clearly you live and breathe this every day. How much of this is technology driven? How much of it is the actual data driven? And I guess then you get into the question with the data, like what is the data? Like what are we trying to capture and why?
That's a really good question. So, you know, I started off as a person who was capturing data, and when the data wasn't available, I branched into the sort of in the back end. I moved to the front end to help create solutions that would help people capture information. That's where the district summary came from. But you know, I think that if in a perfect world, the solutions you're implementing, Julian, are going to help the clinician and help the patient, and as a byproduct, capture good data. And I think the discharge summary, I hope, is an example of that, because it does help the physician do the job and it helps the patient, but we get great data. The minute you start to say, we're going to add 8 extra clicks so we can get 2 more pieces of information, and I'm sure that the nurse or the physician or the RT won't mind doing it, that's when you start to get into huge problems. People don't want to be data entry technicians. They want to care for patients, and the more that you can solutions that take passively the data that you need, the better. So that's a really good point.
Great. Thank you very much. So I just want to, is anybody online, would anybody like to ask a question? Please raise your hand. That's good. Okay, I don't see any more questions. I'm not going to, what I'd like to do actually is close up with a poll, but also a couple of announcements, if we could. So again, thank you very much, Eric. That was fantastic. And for those of you who are online, Eric will also be, he's co-chairing this Western Emergency Department Operations Conference, which is an extension of this webinar series. And it is occurring in Vancouver at the WASC Center, and it is Friday, April 27th and 28th. And it's improving patient care, aligning provider treatment, place, and time. We've got an excellent lineup, and you'll be seeing some emails coming your way if you haven't already. Please consider registering for this. It's a great way to bring together all the different players, decision makers, policy makers, administrators, clinicians to the table to really discuss around what those issues are around improving ED patient flow. So, Eric, did you have anything to add around the WeDoc conference?
No, I would say that, you know, this is in Calgary and Vancouver. This is the 3rd WeDoc and the first one in. We follow the regular rotation. You know, it's only coming every 3 or 4 years, I guess. Every 3 years.
Yeah.
3 years, and so I think we have, you know, speakers coming from all over the country. We have an international cast as well. We have Matthew Cook from England, the author of the 4-Hour Rule. Will be video conference, and I think it should be a really good program, and I hope that you can attend.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And thanks again. One last thing is the next webinar will be on March 30th, Friday, March 30th, and I have Jody Crane, who's an emergency physician who does a lot of lean improvement work. He's also co-chair of their group in Virginia, and he'll be speaking about leaning up the emergency department. We're just finalizing the objectives for that day. So look for that advertisement, and again, this presentation will be up online probably in the middle of next week. Actually, we've done a little bit of editing. So again, thank you very much. It's just after 1 o'clock, and I know everybody has a busy day. So thank you, and have a great day.